always know you could feel beauty rising.
Hi, my name is Sue Skasky with Vermont Volunteer Services for Animals Humane Society, and welcome to our show For the Animals. Today we have a discussion on Healing Touch Reiki, and we're fortunate to have Sylvia Newberry, who is a non-traditional Reiki master, teacher, who maintains a holistic healing practice at the Healing Arts Clinic in Windsor, Vermont. At the time she was attuned to Reiki, she was the nurse manager of the operating room at Mount Ascutney Hospital, and her nursing responsibilities give her a fairly unique perspective on Reiki healing. She's also a practitioner of Healing Touch and has completed an apprenticeship in medicinal herbs offered by Rosemary Gladstar. She lives in Heartland, Vermont with her husband and has a wonderful rescue dog named Scooter. I had the good fortune to meet Sylvia a couple weeks ago when a very dear friend, Angela Day, was getting ready to pass. And Angela was just phenomenal when it came to animals. She truly lived her belief and her compassion and empathy. She was a great supporter of VVSA. Whenever we needed anything, she was right there. And Sylvia came on her last day and did Reiki that gave Angela the okay to pass, and pass peacefully. She truly did. So welcome, Sylvia, and thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Sue. It's my pleasure.
So you were educated as a registered nurse and practiced for more than 35 years at a very high-level job at Mount Ascutney Hospital. Was it a huge leap for you from nursing practice to the practice of alternative complementary modalities?
It wasn't for me. It gave me the opportunity to present myself and to care for my patients in a way that's more natural and more intuitive. For me, it was almost a sense of relief, something that I'd been looking for my whole nursing career and hadn't been able to find.
Mm-hmm. How did you happen to become interested in Reiki and Healing Touch?
I became interested in Reiki and Healing Touch as part of my own healing journey. I was having low back pain that we couldn't find any. The doctors could explain the cause of it, but they couldn't offer me any Western medical way to relieve it. And so they told me I needed to live with it.
Oh, I hate that line.
Well, I told them I would live with it, but I wasn't going to live with it on their terms. And fortunately, there was a radiologist working at Mount Ascutney Hospital who was using acupuncture to deal with a physical pain issue. And I talked with her, and I began to have acupuncture treatments, and I discovered a whole world that I had never experienced before. Right. I could feel energy, I could feel the way that it shifted and the way that it changed, and things that I had been taught as being pretty much carved in stone, all of a sudden I realized there were other options, other ways of experiencing things. And I was very successfully treated. It took a period of time, but over time the acupuncture made the pain go away. And then one day my acupuncturist said to me, "Sylvia, you can come every month or every week if you want to and pay me to do acupuncture on you, and it will keep your pain away, or you can learn to do it yourself."
I didn't realize you know how to do acupuncture.
I don't know how to do acupuncture, but I used Reiki and Healing Touch and some other energetic understandings and modalities that tie into the basic concepts of acupuncture, and learned to modulate my own energy.
Okay. Tell me, compare the two practices. Just explain briefly how they're similar and how they're different.
Okay. Reiki has its foundations in very ancient wisdom. The story behind Reiki that came to the United States is that the information about it was found in ancient Tibetan texts, and there are people who will tell you that those texts are still in the ancient Tibetan monasteries today. A very ancient understanding, very simple in the way that it's done. It's not taught left-brained. It's not an intellectual experience. It's something that that you learn from your heart.
Would you just explain that briefly, left brain, right brain?
Well, left brain is very intellectual, very logical, very methodical, very scientific. Right brain is more emotional, more heart-centered. And so with Reiki, it's not so much what you know. You don't have to know a lot to do it. You don't have to have a lot of experience to do it. You don't have to understand what it is that you're doing. There's not a lot of thought that goes into it. And I think some of the most powerful experiences I've had with Reiki have been at times when I could really sort of take myself out of the equation. I make the contact with the person who I'm working with, and then I simply let go, and I'm just there. And the Reiki is an intelligent, has its own intelligence. It has its own wisdom. By the way, the word Reiki sometimes puts people off a little bit because it sounds very magical and mystical, but it's simply translated universal healing energy from Japan. So it's really, and sometimes I don't even use that word because it does put people off, but it's the concept that is so powerful. Healing Touch, on the other hand, is a program that was developed by a nurse. She recognized the power of healing energy. She wanted to make it available to nurses and to have it be acceptable in academic medical settings. And so she put together a training program that is more left-brained. It goes back, it incorporates healing techniques that some of them are ancient, some of them are very modern, some of them are current day healers that use these techniques. There are more prescribed hand positions, more prescribed actions to be taken during a Healing Touch session than there are in a Reiki session.
Is that considered laying on of hands?
I would say either one of them
Okay.
can be considered them, because that's the way that the contact is made, and the concept that's in it. I would almost think Reiki was more laying on of hands than Healing Touch was. Healing Touch, you're actually taught to manipulate the energy field that's around an individual to actually create changes in the energy field, where with Reiki you allow the energy to create the change.
Now with Angela, explain to me what you were doing with Angela.
With Angela, I was doing what I usually do. I don't do either Healing Touch or Reiki purely. I do a blended form of the two of them. I attune myself to the Reiki energy, the universal healing energy. But in Angela's case, I was working in her energy field, opening up the energy centers in her body. If you've ever been involved with someone who is dying, it's frequently almost a physical struggle. Some people liken it to the being born a second time.
Labor,
right? And no woman who has ever
That's right.
has ever given birth is going to argue about the fact that it's hard work.
Oh, please. They had books that I read, every book. What do they say? Like, transition through. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Give me a break. Labor's labor.
Labor is labor. And for a lot of people who die, who are in the dying process, they have the same experience, or at least from our perspective, it looks that way.
Right.
And they're almost desperate for energy, that the struggle is because they don't have enough energy to complete what it is that they need to, whatever it is that they need to do. And so I was opening the energy centers throughout her body, allowing them to fill with energy, allowing them to balance, and to provide her with what she needed to make the transition. I mean, we can guess what it's like, what the individual is actually going through, but when we watch it from this side, that seems to be what happens. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, I've got the support that I need. I don't have to be afraid, and the energy is there, physical, spiritual, at the very soul level, so that they can complete that transition.
Greg and I took a class in Reiki. It was offered in Hanover. It was really interesting. And unfortunately, I have not kept up practicing it, but our conversation before, how you just naturally do Reiki. In fact, we were talking with somebody in the audience today, a child. You had mentioned if a child hurts themselves, your first instinct is to go and hold or feel better. Or if you whack your hand with a hammer, you hold on to the thumb. Yeah. You're giving that healing touch. You're giving the energy. So it's not something that people should, be afraid of, or what is this? It's very natural.
It is very natural, and you're right in bringing up the element of fear, because there is, on the part of at least some people, fear and discomfort with the concept of Reiki. It seems like it's something very strange. That was sort of my impression when I started, when I was attuned. I don't think I really understood. I probably still don't really understand what I was getting into. But as I have worked with it, it is anything but frightening for me. It's hard to explain, but it's very natural. What you said about being natural is absolutely right. You don't learn Reiki. There's some discussion within, I know even within the Healing Touch community, that Reiki isn't valid because you can't learn how to do anything that complex in a weekend or in one class or whatever. And in reality, you don't. It sounds flip when I say you're attuned to Reiki and then the energy becomes your teacher, but that's exactly what happened to me. I did not maintain close contact with the woman who attuned me, but synchronistically, all of these people crossed my paths. All of these opportunities came to me to demonstrate to me exactly how simple it was, exactly how powerful it was, and how I didn't have to be afraid of it. In fact, if we make the assumption that Reiki is heart-centered, then you can stretch that assumption a little farther and say that it's based in love, or it is love, and the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is fear.
Right.
So letting go of fear increases the intensity, the effectiveness, the whatever of Reiki.
A person does not have to believe that the treatment will work to have it be effective. And I personally liken it to a radio. You know that it works because you hear what's being transmitted. It works. Whether you believe it or not, it's happening.
Right.
And that's how I try to explain to people, because there was a woman at the hospital who said, well, it's only if you believe in Reiki. And I said, well, no, actually, that's not right. Do you get that an awful lot?
I do. I get that some. It's, and I agree with you. You don't have to agree. And you don't have to agree, but it also can't be, it's also not something that can be forced on you. At some point, at some level that we don't recognize in everyday interactions, there is a connection and an agreement that's made, whether you want to say it's at the soul level or at some different energetic level. Energy, it can be blocked. An individual can say they want to receive Reiki, and yet they can block the person, the Reiki practitioner can feel that the energy isn't moving, that there's like a block there. Or they can block, they can say to your face that they don't want it and that they're blocking it, and in reality you can feel the energy being drawn.
You were talking about your animals. One that, and we've done a couple shows on Reiki with animals, so let me tell you, they were very fascinating, but talk about your two.
Well, I have had two very different experiences with two very different animals. We had a big old black tomcat that was around when I was first attuned to Reiki, and he would come and sit in my lap. He would crawl up in my lap, and I would be reading or doing needlework or something, and he would wiggle and squirm and get himself around so that my hands were just where he wanted them, and then he would give this big sigh and start purring. And that was what he wanted. And I've been told that most cats don't like Reiki, that most cats will get up and leave or whatever, but this particular one loved it. And then I had a big old Irish setter who had a lot of physical problems, and I always told him that it would be really beneficial if he would let me do some with him. But as soon as I would start to work with energy, whether it was on myself or the cat or someone else, he could be sound asleep, and he would raise his head and look at me in utter disgust and get up and stomp out of the room, and he wouldn't come back until I was finished.
Yeah. Well,
so they have a real sense for
Well, I
for
had the
energy.
benefit of you the day you were doing Reiki on Angela. I went home I feel great. So thank you for that.
It's not something that is contained within the individual. By sharing it, we're sending it out into the world around us, and heaven knows the world around us is in need of healing energy.
Tell me what type of conditions these modalities are commonly used for.
They can be used for anything, and people usually come because they have an issue with pain that hasn't been resolved or that is problematic. Some people like to use it prior to surgery. I've even accompanied patients through the operating room and been there with them during the surgery and done Reiki. People who are recovering from surgery, there's been documentation that wounds will heal faster. People who just need to relax, which is most of us. It's a great stress reliever, just makes you feel good. People who are dying, people who are being born, it covers the whole spectrum. There's not too many of us that don't benefit.
Are there any types of practices that this might interfere with the allopathic medical care?
I've never seen that happen. I have only seen it benefit, and I have on a number of occasions seen physicians who were skeptical, who said we could do it because they didn't think it would do anything, admit that they weren't sure what had happened, but something had, and it was a shift for the positive. Not that there might not be some situations, but I've never seen one.
So what would I look for if I wanted to find a Reiki practitioner? What types of questions would I ask?
Well, I think it's really important that you feel comfortable with them. There's a number of different schools of Reiki, and of course there's a myriad of individuals who are practicing, who bring their own touch to it. My suggestion would be that you ask to speak with them face to face, and that you sit with them and ask them whatever questions you have and be attuned to their energy. You need somebody who's comfortable in their own skin, comfortable with what they're doing. I get leery of people who are very dogmatic. I get very leery of people who make promises about what the result is going to be. My Reiki master left me with a real jewel of wisdom, and I share it frequently with my students. And that is that when I, as a Reiki practitioner, come to a healing session, I should come with no expectations. I shouldn't come to relieve the pain. I shouldn't come to increase the healing. I shouldn't come with anything other than to create healing, harmonizing, and balancing. And then when the session is over, I should take no credit for any outcomes. It wasn't me.
Okay. We just got the 5-minute sign. I do want to end the show with you demonstrating Reiki on me, a person. But you summed up your thoughts on Reiki practice in a couple of paragraphs, and I'd like to read them. I'm not certain where to start, only that it's important that I do. While at times my experiences with Reiki seem to be minimal, at other times they appear to be deep and rich and filled with meaning. And as I continue to take advantage of the opportunities to practice and to connect with the clients, the teachers that come my way, I'm more and more certain that the real opportunity for healing with Reiki comes not from the individual laying out of hands, but it is the centering of one's life around the awareness of the energy and the experiences of the energy permeating every part of one's life. I thought you summed that up very well there.
I do believe that. I don't believe that Reiki is something I do. I believe it's something that I am. I mean, it's how I live.
And I'd like to put up contact information on the screen for people to contact you. You mentioned that you teach
I do
others?
teach.
Okay.
I teach when students, when individuals come and ask me. I don't schedule classes and try to attract people. But
Oh, okay. Okay, and you had some books that you were referring to earlier. Could you just talk about those briefly?
Well, I was just wanted, there is a lot of traditional, there's a lot of tradition in the teaching of Reiki and a lot of stories that are told. It was originally an oral history. It was passed on orally. Students weren't allowed to take notes. They couldn't. There was nothing to read, nothing to take with them. And we were told in the United States that this is the way that it was developed in Japan. And it's just fascinating to me that there are individuals who have gone to Japan, who have researched the history, who have found the home where Dr. Usui lived. They found the grave where he was buried. They have actually found written handbooks that he gave to his students. He was not as precise and as much routine-oriented as some of the Reiki teachers that brought it to this country are. He apparently taught very intuitively. Every class he taught was different, and so it's just nice to know that
there are books
that there are books out there that you can look at and get different perspectives on Reiki. There's more than just one, and whatever perspective you decide to go with, it may not be mine. Mine may not be right for everybody, but follow your heart.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much for coming on the show. And we have a few more topics I'd really like to discuss with you, but thank you for watching our show For the Animals, and again, in memory of our dear friend Angela Day.
Reiki is built on the premise that we are energetic beings. We're created. We are energy. This physical body is sort of an illusion, and our energy field extends out a distance from us. It's the way that we interact with each other. It's the way that we interact with the universe. And while it wasn't taught in Reiki, it was taught in Healing Touch to use a pendulum like a dowser uses, and to you can demonstrate, sort of be a visual to see where the energy is that we're working with. You don't have to make physical contact with a person doing Reiki. You can work in that energy field. In fact, Reiki teaches that you don't even have to be physically present with the individual. You can work on someone who's across the room. You can work on someone with someone who is in another building, in another town, in another country, on the other side of the world. We're all connected energetically in a way that allows that to happen. You can demonstrate where the energy centers are on the physical body, and that's where we place hands during Reiki. As a Reiki practitioner, I would place my hand over Sue's heart, and that creates an energetic connection between my heart and her heart. My hand becomes the extension of my heart. And then I pause briefly for however long it takes, and I feel my connection with the earth. I open my heart to the energy of the universe. I feel the connection with Sue. and then I will, depending on the situation, I can put my hand. The traditional hand positions are on the head, but if Sue doesn't like people touching her head, then I won't touch her. And the traditional hand positions for Reiki are guidelines. I have had some of my most powerful Reiki experiences sitting in an operating room at the foot of a fully draped surgical patient with my hand on her foot. And the outcome of that couple of hours that I sat there while surgeons clipped an aneurysm in her brain blew my mind. I was an operating room nurse. I knew what to expect. But that it didn't end up that way. It came out very differently. She was very balanced, very peaceful. It puzzled the physicians. They couldn't understand it. And all I did was sit with my hand on her foot. So where I put my hands doesn't matter. The energy field is front and back. The energy centers come from both the front and the back of the body. You can access them from both sides. Doesn't make a difference. And then I would continue down. I would do hand positions coming down down Sue's body. Traditionally, I would do her arms, I would do her feet, and I would finish by just running my hands through her energy field. And I did this a lot with Angela that day, if you remember. Smoothing out the energy field, and just the overall effect is usually a very profound sense of peace and calm. It's hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. It's very different than anything that I have felt or been able to create.
Sylvia, thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
I really appreciate it.
At dusk, there came a turning. There was a moment when all was known. You could feel beauty rising on the breeze, the shapes, the stone. And I would ride upon the breeze that shapes the stone, across the sky and beyond, to that place where all is known. When I could fly, when I could fly down that road.